Joe Rogan is the most watched cigar smoker on the planet, which means every brand wants to be in his humidor, but most of them don't make the cut. Today, we're exposing the 5 most overrated cigars Rogan wouldn't be caught dead smoking, and revealing the 3 absolute bangers he actually sparks up in the studio. Let's break it down. Walk straight into Joe Rogan's Austin studio, look at the black lacquer box sitting to his right on every single episode, and you will notice the most famous yellow band in cigar history is completely missing from the lineup. At number 1, the Cohiba Red Dot is the cigar that should be in every serious smoker's rotation by reputation alone, and Joe has never once lit one on camera across more than 2,000 recordings. Why is the world's loudest tobacco voice ignoring tobacco's loudest brand name? Because the Red Dot is not the Cuban Cohiba. General Cigar Company licensed the most famous word in cigars for the American market, wrapped a mild Cameroon leaf around Dominican filler, and sold it back to viewers who think the name on the band equals the leaf inside. Joe sat with Bill Burr, Aaron Rodgers, and Rob Lowe while sparking a Foundation, not a Red Dot. The biggest tell in cigar culture is what an aficionado does not reach for, and Rogan reaches past Cohiba every single recording. Speaking of brands that bait viewers with a famous name, here is where every casual viewer gets played. Joe Rogan absolutely has lit a Romeo y Julieta on the podcast. On the legendary episode with Ron White, Joe sparked up a Cuban mini Romeo, looked across at his guest, and called them really damn good. Ron immediately agreed and revealed it was his ultimate golf course smoke. So at number 2, why are we putting Romeo y Julieta on this list? Because the Romeo Joe actually smoked was the Cuban original, and the Romeo on every American shelf is the Dominican Romeo y Julieta 1875, built by Altadis for soft mass-market volume, sharing nothing with the Cuban legend except the romance on the band. Viewers run to their local shop, buy the 1875 thinking they are sparking up the cigar Joe loved, and walk away with flat cedar, dry paper, and a finish that vanishes before the band gets warm. Rogan smoked the real one with Ron White. The American spin-off is the cigar pretending to be that experience. Joe Rogan signed a $250 million Spotify deal in 2024. He could light a Gurkha Black Dragon every single morning for the rest of his life and not feel it. He does not. At number 3, the Black Dragon is the $1,000 status flex that Rogan can effortlessly afford and aggressively does not bother with. The stick sits inside a hand-carved camel-bone chest, daring guests to spend 4 figures on the privilege of saying the box is in the room. Underneath the bone and the gold and the Himalayan branding, you are smoking Honduran filler under a Connecticut Habano wrapper, the exact same construction sitting inside $15 sticks at any decent lounge. Gurkha sells the chest, not the leaf. And the most fascinating thing about Joe's humidor is that the richest podcaster on earth chooses his cigars exactly the same way a working aficionado does. By the smoke, not by the carving. Status cigars are for impressing the room. Joe smokes for the next 3 hours of conversation. Joe Rogan picked up his first cigar during Sober October of 2019, told Cigar Aficionado the whole story on their 2021 cover, and the first thing he learned was how to walk past the cigar every starter lounge pushes on you. At number 4, the Macanudo Café is the polite Connecticut shade that every beginner humidor builds itself around, and it is exactly the cigar Joe's palate skipped past on the way to the Maduros he actually lives in today. The Café is engineered to be background noise, flat hay, thin cream, a finish that disappears before the ash builds half an inch, dialed mild on purpose to offend nobody in the lounge. For the same $8, Rogan went to slow-fermented Connecticut Broadleaf with deep leather and dark coffee on the pull. The Macanudo Café is the cigar for people who do not actually want to taste their cigars. Joe is a guy who, after years of guests across the table, absolutely wants to taste what he is smoking. And from the cigar that tastes like nothing, we hit the cigar that is not really a cigar. In the entire run of the Joe Rogan Experience, with premium cigars always within arm's reach, Rogan has never once lit a Swisher Sweet or a Backwoods on camera. At number 5, this is the textbook example of a product built entirely for marketing and pop culture, not for the leaf or for the smoker. Sold at every gas station in America, these are machine-made on automated lines using homogenized tobacco paste for the binder, reconstituted leaf bound in glue for the wrapper, and scrap filler heavily flavored with artificial sweeteners. The actual manufacturing cost sits under 25 cents a stick, retailing for $1 to $4. with the rest of the price tag built on volume and pop culture cosigns. Joe is a guy who lit a flawless Padron on the show with Bryan Callen and personally handed a custom box to Tom Green while saying his man Nick really knows cigars. That is the bar. Machine-rolled gas station tobacco is the convenience store tax, dressed up to look like cigar culture, and Joe rejects the entire category. If the cigar costs less than your gas station coffee, Joe is not smoking it, and neither should you. Subscribe, because the bangers are coming now. There is exactly one cigar in the entire world with Joe Rogan's actual face printed on the band. And at number 1 on the heroes list, this is where his story stops being about smoking cigars and starts being about making them. Nicholas Melillo, the founder of Foundation Cigar Company, blended the Foundation Connecticut Broadleaf personally for Joe. Slow fermented Connecticut broadleaf wrapper, Nicaraguan filler, his face on every single band and on every single box. The proof this is not a vanity celebrity project lives on the episode where Joe handed one to Tom Green, opened the lid in real time, and said my man Nick really knows cigars. 3 days later, he offered one to Ari Shafir with the line, "Want a cigar with my face on it?" That is a man so confident in the leaf inside the cellophane, he is willing to staple his own reputation to every band. Coffee, chocolate, and spice on the pull, with a 40-minute finish that holds while the conversation runs. The broadleaf is what happens when a podcaster with this much reach decides he is going to put his name on a cigar he would happily smoke himself every day. But there is one cigar even more important to Joe than the one with his face on it. When Cigar Aficionado put Joe on their September-October 2021 issue, the photographer Paul Mobley caught him next to a freshly opened box, and the cigar in his hand was not the one with his signature on the band. At number 2, the Foundation Wise Man Maduro Robusto is the cigar Joe calls his absolute favorite, and the cigar that sits closest to his right hand on every recording. Mexican San Andres wrapper, wrapped around Nicaraguan filler grown on Foundation's own private farm in Estelí. The magazine's editors named the Wise Man Maduro number 3 in the entire top 25 of the year. A 95-point score from blind tasting professionals, putting it on par with cigars 3 times the price. Dark fruit, coffee, cream, raisin, dark chocolate, and earth, with a finish that builds across the full hour of a podcast block. Foundation's art director Thief Operandi hand painted 2 custom boxes specifically for Joe, one stamped with the Joe Rogan logo, one showing him as a Nicaraguan shaman. These are the boxes he opens on air before passing a wise man to whoever walks into the room. When a smoker with this much exposure to the entire industry picks a daily cigar, this is the one. Not the carved box, not the famous name, the leaf. On the Joe Rogan episode with Bryan Callen, Joe sparked up a Padron. At number 3, the Padron 1964 Anniversary is the cigar that earns the permanent spot in the lacquer rotation next to his Foundation lineup, and the only non-Foundation stick Rogan keeps in serious play. Padron is the family-owned Nicaraguan house that decided decades ago to outsmart the corporate competition instead of outspending them, and the proof shows up in every leaf. Every single tobacco leaf in the anniversary line is aged a minimum of 4 years before a roller ever picks it up. That patience hits you on the first pull. A sun-grown Nicaraguan puro, full-bodied without a harsh edge, layered with smooth complexity, butter, and slow-building depth across the full hour. Cigar Aficionado crowned the 1964 Anniversary Maduro the number 1 cigar of the year. For $15 to $20 a stick, you get the kind of unbroken consistency that lets a podcaster light one at the start of a 3-hour conversation and know exactly what the second hour will taste like. Foundation is Joe's home. Padron is the only road trip he takes. Full-bodied Nicaraguan Maduro, boutique blender, hand-rolled by people who care about the leaf, not the logo. Smoke that, or keep smoking what the marketing department sold you. Subscribe, and stop getting played.